fat balls, like the ones that I've got in this tray here, are really important for your garden birds during the winter months. The ones that you buy in shops tend to be packed with all sorts of low quality, low nutrition ingredients, whereas the ones that you can make at home can be packed with all of the high quality ingredients that you want to give your birds. They're also really important because at this time of year, during autumn and winter, all of the nutritional quality of food out in the natural environment tends to be lower, so it can be harder for birds to find food to keep them going. So if you want to learn how to make your own homemade fat balls, or even more decorative versions like this butterfly that I've got here, then stick around to this video because I'm giving you a recipe and a process to create these. The first thing you need to do is gather your ingredients. We want to have 1 part of lard to every 2 parts of dry ingredient, and make sure the lard has warmed up enough to room temperature so that you can manipulate it in your hands. Next, you can use all sorts of things, so I've chosen peanuts and raisins as the majority of my mixture, some cheese to add in a little bit more of interest, and then also some high energy seed mix because this contains a lot of the nutrients the birds need. You should also make sure that you've got the right tools. I'm using a cheese grater, a chopping board, a mixing bowl, and then I've also got a digital scale for weighing all of my ingredients to make sure I've got 1 part of lard to every 2 parts of mixture, as well as a mould that I'm trying out for butterfly shapes. Now it's time to measure out your dry ingredients. I'm starting off with cheese, and I've chosen to put about 1/4 of my dry mix as cheese. Next, I'm adding in my peanuts and raisins. Again, I'm using about 1/4 of my dry mix as being made up of peanuts and raisins. The great thing about this recipe is that you don't need to waste anything to do it because all of your ingredients can be saved for later recipes. The final ingredient in the dry mix is the seed mixture. Half of my dry mix is going to be made up of seeds. Now I'm pouring my dry mixture into a mixing bowl so that the bowl for the scales is left free for measuring out the lard. I want to mix all of this up so that when I do make the fat balls, all of the different ingredients have an even spread throughout them. The next step is to measure out your lard. Now this step should be fairly easy to cut up the lard into much smaller manageable pieces because you've already left it out to room temperature so that you can cut through it. Now you're finally ready to add your dry mix into the lard so that you can mix it all up together and get a nice even spread of all of the dry ingredients throughout the lard. You want to do this slowly and incrementally, adding only a little bit of the dry mix, then mixing it up into the lard, then adding the next bit of the dry mix, and so on until you've got all of the dry mix fully and evenly mixed in there. Now a fair warning, this step can be really messy because the lard sticks to your hands quite a lot. You know when you've got a nice even spread because you can pick up all of the mixture and it will hold together rather than bits of seeds and peanuts falling out from it. Now you're ready to start shaping your fat balls. I've decided to start by using my butterfly mould, but you can use any sort of mould that you like. Also make sure to get out things like string if you're using it. If your lard is at room temperature, then it should be fairly easy to get this mixture to mould into whichever shape you're trying to make it go to. Now this was my first time trying to get this mix to go into anything other than a fat ball shape, and it took a bit of experimenting to try and get it all fitting in nicely and then also to get it out of the mould, but I'm quite happy with how the end result turned out. I used a skewer to make a hole through the butterfly so that I could get the string through, and then I threaded it through carefully and tied a knot so that it would stay upright. If you are going to do this, then you need to keep a close eye on the fat balls so that you can collect the string at the end when they're done and not litter in your garden. As well as my moulded butterfly shapes, I made some fat blocks that I could put in my specific fat block feeder, as well as rolling up some fat balls to put into the fat ball feeder that's in my garden. You can see me putting them into this tray lined with greaseproof paper so that I can put it in the fridge before putting them out. Because you kept your fat balls out and were working with them with your hands, they got quite warm,
so they wouldn't be able to hold their structural integrity very well. This is why I'm putting them in the fridge first. While waiting for them to cool down, it's cleanup time.
During the warmer months, you want to avoid putting out your fat balls because the warm weather tends to make the fat go rancid and that can make the birds sick. You should also avoid putting out things like peanuts within your fat balls during spring months because the nestlings within the birds' nests will actually choke on these and you're doing more harm than you are good.
I left mine overnight before getting them out, but really you just need to test to make sure that they're firm and not really moulding to the shape of your hand anymore when you touch them.
But now let's see what I managed to attract in my garden.
I set out the homemade fat balls through various spots in my garden, and then I also set up some camera traps to be able to monitor them while I wasn't looking. My resident blue tip pair showed up first to investigate, but as is typical with animals, they completely ignored the thing that I actually wanted them to look at, so I had to wait a little bit longer to be able to catch any images on camera. The first bird to show an interest was this magpie, who has a bit of a look at it and then picks up a big chunk of the fat ball. But then from another angle I can see there's actually two of them there in the distance, both having a little check of these new fat balls, before it picks it up and then throws it down on the floor. After throwing it on the floor, it decides to go down and actually eat it. The next bird to stop by is this robin. It has a bit of a look at it, but doesn't seem to be interested. Maybe it'll come back later. Here comes a member of my resident house sparrow flock who takes a little piece and then decides to fly off to eat it. Next up, one of my resident blue tip pair is back, and this time it decides that the food must be safe enough to eat. And over there in the background, just about in camera view, is one of my blackbirds having a go at some of the ball-shaped ones. But it's the female blackbird who decides to come over and investigate the one this camera's pointed at. She has a look at it for a good while before leaning over to peck at it just as the video clip ends. Both the blue tit in the foreground of this video clip and the blackbird eating at the fat balls at the background of this clip seem to really enjoy it and keep returning over and over again. But we can't forget about that robin who's returned to have another look. However, this one's being a bit distracted because it's trying to chase off a territorial threat. This gives the female blackbird a chance to have another go at the food. Until finally, my robin is able to peek its head in and have a go at some of the food for itself.
Let me know in the comments if you decided to try this recipe. I'd love to hear what birds you managed to attract to your garden with these homemade fat balls.